Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old-timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs.
Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. Boy, it's been one heck of a week. Oh man, if you have been following the show for a while, let me just go ahead and say, you may notice a little bit of difference in the sound quality today. I got a new microphone. Yes, I have finally gotten a new microphone. I had been noticing a slight degradation in the sound quality over the past, it started slight and it got progressively worse over the past few weeks, and I just finally went ahead and found a microphone I really like, and it seems to be giving me a nice, crisp, clear sound. But along with that crisp, clear sound, you're probably going to notice my nose is a little stuffy. You see, if y'all follow me very long, you've probably seen the picture I usually use of myself, because I don't like having my picture taken. I never have. I'm like camera shy beyond words. Now, I don't mind doing videos. I don't mind standing in front of people and talking. I have literally played music and told stories on stages in front of tens of thousands of people. No problem. I've given speeches. I used to work in politics. I've done a lot of public appearances. But if someone takes out a camera and takes a picture of me, I get about as awkward and shy as can be. I don't know why that is. But in that one picture I usually use, you've seen my little border collie, Buddy. Now, Buddy is my constant companion. About 14 years ago, the anniversary was only a week or two ago. I found him in January. I was out in the middle of nowhere in timber country, and I found a little dog that had been abandoned in the middle of nowhere and left to die. And that's my Buddy. I stopped and got him in the truck, took him home, cleaned him up, gave him a meal. He got in my lap, and he's pretty much stayed there since. He's about 16 years old, mostly blind and deaf now, of course. Still has a tremendous appetite. People ask me, how did my dog get to be so old? Well, aside from the initial round of, shots that dogs have to get in North Carolina, it's law. You have to give him a rabies shot at the very least. He's never been to a vet a single time. I treat him with herbs if he gets sick, and he rarely does, and he eats what I eat. And he's now 16 years old, approximately. He could even be 17. Just judging on the condition of his teeth, judging by the condition of his teeth, I guess I should say. When I found him, he was somewhere around 2 or 3 years old. He wasn't a puppy anymore, but he never got any bigger. He's just a little fella. And the other night, I guess it was Thursday night, it was late and it was raining and it was cold, and he wanted to go outside to pee, so I let him out and he just took off. And I couldn't catch him, and it was dark. I couldn't see. I don't know what his motivation was. Maybe he got disoriented because, like I said, he's pretty much blind. He's never done anything like that before. When he was younger, he might chase a deer occasionally, but he always came right back. He just disappeared. And I looked for him all night. I was out in the rain, the cold rain, and I had felt, the day before, like maybe I was coming down with a little bit of a cold. But yeah, it definitely did not do me any good to wander around in the cold rain with a flashlight all night in, about 35-degree weather. And it was really funny, kind of come to think of it. I kept running into the same herd of deer. There were about 7 or 8 does that I kept, every time I would walk up to them, I'm like, oh, hey, there's some deer. And they'd look at me and they'd walk off. And I'd go maybe another quarter mile down the road and I'd walk right into the same herd of deer. They must have thought I was harassing them all night. But the story actually does end well. Uh, Buddy found a pond, and, as old as he was, I had every belief he was just, going to go crawl off somewhere and die. Because, male dogs have a tendency to do that. They like to get away from people when the end is coming. Uh, I don't know if that was his motivation, or like I said, I have no idea. He must have seen lights reflecting on the pond and thought maybe he was getting toward a lit front porch. He fell in the pond. He can swim, but he hates to swim. He hates water, so he didn't do it intentionally. And someone fished him out about 10 a.m. the next morning, and he was in really bad shape. In fact, we believed he was dead. But, I must have prayed about 27 rosaries that night, and I never stopped praying. I prayed constantly, and Buddy came to. Buddy's back. Buddy is back with us. He doesn't even seem to remember anything traumatic happened. The first few hours after he came around, he was in pretty bad shape. I guess he'd probably been a little comatose, for a while. But he just stayed in my lap, and I got him good and warm, and I honestly thought we were going to lose him any minute, but he came around, and he started walking around, and I got him to eat some turkey broth, and started eating some solid food, and now he's back to normal. This, like I said, half blind, half deaf, 16-year-old border collie that has not left my side in 14 years. He's back. And if y'all ever wonder whether or not prayers get answered, I can tell you, prayers get answered. But I have come down with a cold. I caught a chill. They say George Washington uh, probably had a little bit of a virus and felt like he had recovered, and he went out and rode around his farm in a cold rain and got sick and died a few days later. The cold, it's interesting, in herbal medicine, we especially look at like Father Nape and the German folk medicine tradition of taking cold showers and cold baths. But it also, and that actually does strengthen the immune system when you're healthy over time. And you can also use hot and cold water to help break a fever, and it's very beneficial. In fact, Father Nape cured himself and a friend from tuberculosis. They were both near death. Just using cold water, just cold water baths. Someday I've actually done a whole podcast on Father Nape's water cure, but someday I'll probably kind of put together a book on the more systematic approach of the Nape water cure method. If you follow Wim Hof, there's a lot of similarity there. It's an old tradition, and it is very good, but sometimes, especially when you're under a whole lot of stress, and to say the least, I was under a whole lot of stress. I went almost 48 hours without sleep. I mean, little dog means the world to me. And my immune system got weak, and yeah, I've got a cold. So the new microphone is going to let you hear that I have a head cold, and being an herbalist, I have the herbs to use. I am using thyme as an expectorant to keep the congestion manageable and out of my lungs. Along with that, I'm using mullein. Mullein and thyme are both very good lung herbs. It helps a whole lot. Actually, they're certainly as effective, if not more effective, than like Mucinex or what is it, guafazine or whatever the pharmacological name of that medication is. But they just don't last as long. You would have to take a tincture every couple of hours. And, I'm using various other herbs. I'm using turmeric and oregano for their antiviral properties or antibiotic properties, I guess, in the case of oregano. I'm using sage, and, everybody gets a little cold every now and then. And I'll just be down for a little bit, and I'll be right back with my little buddy by my side. But, it reminded me of an old song that Doc Watson used to play. Now, I grew up following Doc around in the mountains of North Carolina, and it was really through Doc that I met so many of the famous musicians in my life that I got to know and hang out with. Guy Clark was a friend. I got to hang out with Arlo Guthrie a little bit. There were so many. I actually had lunch one time with Emmylou Harris, and I mean, probably the most beautiful woman I have ever seen, even in her 60s, with silver hair and just gorgeous. And across the table were the Dixie Chicks. Before anybody knew who the Dixie Chicks were, they had just recorded their debut and they were doing a little touring. And one of them really seemed to kind of get a crush on me. She was really very interested, and I won't say which one, but she was kind of the loudmouth one that got him in a lot of trouble later. I turned down a date with a Dixie Chick, believe it or not, because I was so enthralled with Emmylou Harris and talking about Graham Parsons and listening to her stories and everything. So, it was quite an experience. And Doc used to play this little song, and, I'm just going to do this from memory. His version is a lot prettier. I just remember the chord changes, and I'll just kind of barely hint at the melody. And there probably will be a little pause because I don't remember all the lyrics. I'm going to have to look back at the lyric sheet. But I thought you might enjoy this, and it's pretty typical of the Southern Mountain lifestyle. Sun comes up, sun goes down, hands on the clock go round and round. I just got up, it's time to lay down. Life gets tedious, don't it? Well, my shoes untied, but shucks, I don't care, 'cause I reckon I ain't going nowhere. I'd wash my face and comb my hair, but that's just too much wasted effort. Open the door and the flies swarm in. When I shut the door, I'm a-sweating again. And in the process, I crack my shin. Well, it's just one darn thing after another. Cow went dry and the hens went away, and the fish all quit biting last Saturday. My troubles keep piling up day by day, and now I'm getting dandruff. Well, the old gray mule, I think the rascal's sick, for when I stuck him in the rump with a pin on a stick, he humped up his back, but he just wouldn't kick. There's something cockeyed somewhere. Well, the old hound dog's a-howling and so forlorn. That's the laziest dog that ever was born. He's a-howling because he's sitting on a thorn, and he's just too tired to move over. The roof leaks and the chimney leans. There's a hole in the seat of my old blue jeans, and I've ate up the last of the pork and beans. Well, you just can't depend on nothing. And the mouse is spinning on the cupboard floor. He's been at it now for a month or more. And when he gets there, he's sure gonna be sore. Ain't a darn thing yet. It's debts and taxes and pains and woes and miseries, and that's how it goes. And now I'm getting a cold in my nose. Life gets tasteless, don't it? Sun comes up and the sun goes down, and the hands on the clock go round and round. I just get up, it's time to lay down. Life gets tedious, don't it? Now let's get into some herbs. Let's talk today about Jamaican dogwood. Jamaican dogwood is a really interesting plant. Now, I have discussed this one before when I've talked about herbs for pain. Jamaican dogwood is not a dogwood, okay? It's not in the, I believe it's the Cornus family. Jamaican dogwood is actually Piscidia piscipula. Piscidia piscipula. Now, if you remember any French or Spanish you may have taken, you may notice that word piscidia sounds a lot like the word for fish in those languages. The reason is Jamaican dogwood has traditionally been used as a fish poison. It has a certain saponin content, and it has a certain stunning effect on the fish. What it actually does, if you take the bark of this tree and you make a decoction of it, you put it in still water. It doesn't work as well in running water. Now maybe a slow stream would work pretty well. It kind of prevents the fish from absorbing the full amount of oxygen they need through their gills, just temporarily, and that causes them to float to the surface. Of course, it's very illegal in modern times. I don't know if it's illegal in Jamaica. I assume it is. And shoot, if you live in Jamaica and you got those weird crabs that live in the sewers, you could just run out and grab a bunch of those crabs and not even worry about trying to poison fish. I mean, as much as I love fish, I'll take some crab meat any day. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I actually am a huge fan of Jamaican food. I absolutely love, jerk chicken. The soup they make called Manish water, actually, that would be really good for my cold right now. Usually involves boiling a goat's head, very, very spicy, good, rich, very good cooking, actually. But anyway, this tree is unique. In about 50% of people, this tree, the bark of which, made into a tincture, will deaden pain, kill pain, reduce blood pressure, have a narcotic effect, essentially, as effectively as opiates. For about 50% of people, this is a nervous system sedative. Therefore, it should never be combined with opiates because that can actually lead to an overdose. But it can be a seemingly non-addictive. I can't find any research of anyone ever reporting either an addiction or an overdose from Jamaican dogwood. I'm not saying it's not dangerous. Definitely don't overuse it. It's probably a little bit similar to like kratom or kratom, however you want to pronounce that. But where that one has a stimulating effect in certain doses and a depressant effect in other doses, this one is just a pure CNS depressant, and it's very pleasant. I think it could be a very important herb. We are certainly in an epidemic of opioid overdose and all kinds of trouble. I mean, what started with OxyContin, which was, of course, the overprescribed prescription painkiller, has now turned into a fentanyl epidemic that's killed, I think it killed 100,000 Americans last year, and now it's just flowing over our southern border. I mean, every day you hear about some that was confiscated, some they caught that was enough to kill a third or even all of Americans in general. And we can only imagine if that's what they've caught, there's probably 1,000 times more fentanyl flowing across the border than that they don't catch, enough to kill every man, woman, and child in America, mostly made in Chinese labs and being brought across the border by Mexican drug cartels and South American drug cartels. And no one cares. No one does a thing about it. No one cares about the slavery, sex trafficking, girls, boys, women being abused. Everybody just turns a blind eye to it, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce that the Republicans won't dare criticize because it's where their campaigns come from, or the liberals liberal Democrats who don't believe in borders, or NGOs, the Catholic charities and such that are absolutely facilitating slavery, human trafficking, and drug trafficking. I don't care, if I offend somebody on that. I'm years ago worked with a United Nations group on human trafficking, and I've seen with my own eyes what happens to these, you know, children, uh, often raped to death. It's horrid, and I mean, there is no one of any party, and no one of any religion, and no one of any group, charitable organization, or whatever you want to call them, non-governmental organization, whatever. None of them have clean hands. If they are facilitating, if they are allowing this to happen and encouraging this, what they call an open border, supposedly humane policies, no, they have blood on their hands. And frankly, I hope they all go to hell, honestly. I mean, if you've seen what you've seen with what I've seen with my own eyes, I hope every politician in Washington that's allowing this to happen, every so-called charity, every so-called humanitarian organization, and every so-called religious organization. Catholic Charities is very big in this. So are the Methodists. So there's a large Baptist organization that's facilitating a lot of this human trafficking, and they say they're doing it on humanitarian grounds because they're bad people, and they're lying. Okay, they're lying. Anyway, let's get back to Jamaican Dogwood, because if people knew about Jamaican Dogwood, which, as I said, seems to be effective in 50% of people, it could get people off of opiates, opioids, whatever you want to call them, narcotic, synthetic. I mean, fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. This isn't, the old morphine and heroin made from poppies anymore. This is really hardcore bad stuff. But Jamaican Dogwood seems to be as effective for pain and muscle relaxation and nerve pain as most prescription opiates. Safer. Seems to be as effective as marijuana for many people. But it's completely legal. You can get Jamaican Dogwood from any herb seller. Okay? And it, like I said, is presumably, seemingly a much safer product. We don't know why it only works in about 50% of people. It's also true that in about 50% of people, wild lettuce has an opiate-like effect. This is the ancestor to our domestic salad lettuce, but it's a weed. It grows in disturbed soils, which you would call waste areas, usually beside the road, beside railroad tracks, old fields and pastures, poor soil, and it grows tall. I mean, the lettuce we know that grows in nice little heads, it's taken hundreds, if not thousands, of years of plant breeding to reduce this tall, like sometimes 6-7 foot tall weed into that tight head of that plant. It's very bitter. There's plain wild lettuce and there's prickly wild lettuce. Prickly wild lettuce has little prickles, little spines on it. The sap is collected. What you do is you go out on a hot sunny day and you cut the top off, and this white sap, much like the latex type sap of opium, of the opium poppy, will rise to the top. You scrape it off, cut down a couple inches lower, it'll come back up. You keep doing that until you get to the base of the plant, and you will have collected probably a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons of this sap. It then has to be dried, and it can be used in a tincture, it can be smoked, it can be taken in a capsule. You can also tincture the fresh plant. It's not going to be as strong, but if you're a person fortunate enough to be affected by wild lettuce, you will have a painkiller, muscle relaxer, sleep aid that is legal, as far as we know, safe, and free. And you're not going to overdose on something or get hooked on prescription narcotics and ruin your life. See, that's why I think plants like wild lettuce and Jamaican Dogwood are so good. But like I said, it only works for 50% of people, and we don't know why. For me, it does nothing. Jamaican Dogwood does a little, okay, but wild lettuce does nothing. I could take 1.5 pounds of wild lettuce latex or like a gallon of tincture, and only the alcohol in the tincture would affect me. My metabolism just does not respond to wild lettuce. Jamaican Dogwood, it does to a point. I put Jamaican Dogwood for me in the same category as like Bacopa and oh, there's one other herb, Boswellia. Those are very similar in their effects. I am different than most people. I don't know why. Actually, when I had my severe back injury and I was paralyzed for well over a year, almost 2 years, and in such severe pain, the reason I stopped taking prescription opioid medications is because I built up an almost immediate tolerance. It's just something to do with my metabolism. If I take one pill and yeah, it takes care of the pain, it knocked me down and was really powerful, the next time I'd take the same dose and it wouldn't have the same effect. I'd have to take a pill and a half. And I'm serious, like that fast. I mean, so within just a few months, I was getting at dangerous levels of prescription medications, and so I stopped cold turkey and was in so much pain I didn't sleep for 10 days and 10 nights. I actually had uh, a lot of like hallucinations and everything because it was horrible. And it wasn't a drug withdrawal; it was a matter of pain keeping me awake. When it came to Bacopa and Boswellia and Jamaican Dogwood, I take that first dose of this herb, and yeah, it works great. I mean, the pain goes away, muscles relax, and all that. And the next dose isn't strong enough, and within just a few days, these herbs have lost their effectiveness for me entirely. Now, for some people, they don't do that. For about 50% of the population, they can continue to get the benefits of these pain-killing herbs. Those are very fortunate people. And I think for probably 25%, they're going to get a little benefit. But compared to the deadly effects of fentanyl and the lives ruined by Oxycontin and Percocet, Darvocet, you name it, hydrocodone, you go down that list, we really, really need to be looking at herbs. Now, I will tell you, there are a few herbs I have found that work for me and I don't build up a tolerance to them. Kava kava, very good. When I can get some good quality kava kava, it's just a simple muscle relaxant, and that's all I want. I'm not looking to get high or anything. You know, um, one that is extremely powerful, but also extremely dangerous is Gelsemium. It's the state flower of South Carolina. It grows everywhere around here. The root of that plant is, to me, more effective than prescription opiate medications. I don't use it. I'm serious. I won't even touch it because this plant is so dangerous. One half of a drop, I don't even think, 1/4 of a drop of the tincture above the proper dose could stop your heart. It's that powerful. But again, the only reason I mention this, imagine if someone is a hardcore opiate addict, and if instead of being given, I can't remember you see the signs everywhere these days because we're in such an epidemic, these synthetic opiates to help wean them off of heroin, morphine, fentanyl, etc. If we had herbs that were really using a different pathway, so to speak, in the brain that don't seem to have an addictive effect, but could substitute for the addictive, dangerous drugs during the time that it takes them to wean themselves off of them without withdrawal effects, I mean, I've one of my favorite musicians, just going off on another side note, is Johnny Thunders. Johnny Thunders, probably the very best punk rock guitarist of all time. I mean, the man, he was a little fella. He started out in the New York Dolls in the 1970s, and then he went on and had his own bands like Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers. He was phenomenal. I mean, he could play rockabilly and surf guitar and punk rock like crazy. He was also like the worst heroin addict, and they got him on methadone. He then spent the next, I guess, decade addicted to methadone. So he literally just substituted heroin for methadone to the point that it turned his skin green. I mean, this guy was taking seriously high doses, and he died under suspicious circumstances. No one really knows if he kind of fell off the wagon or whatever and started using heroin again, overdosed. It seems like one of his former dealers, he kind of had some dirt on him and may have said that he was going to go to the cops, and he was given what they call a hot shot, which, now that fentanyl's in this country, do you realize how easy it is for criminal organizations to give someone a hot shot to get rid of somebody with just 3 extra grains of fentanyl? Not necessarily in an injection. It could be in a piece of candy they hand them. It could just be dropped into the drink. And we're going to call it a drug overdose, and no one's going to know. I'm telling you, this stuff is really dangerous. So that's the only reason I mentioned Gelsemium, because if there is a scientist, if there is a pharmacist, of course, if there is an herbalist who really wanted to look into solving the opioid crisis, I think that would be well worth investigating. Now, like I said, it's not a plant I mess with. It's just too strong. It's just too powerful. But getting back to Jamaican Dogwood, this is not that powerful of a plant. This is a plant that in about 50% of people helps with pain, especially nerve pain, insomnia, and even tachycardia. So let's get into a little of the specifics on this. And this is definitely one that you want to know about, that you probably want to have in your herbal medicine cabinet. It could really help in a situation where you couldn't get to a pharmacy or a doctor and you were in intense pain. Or like the other night when I was up all night looking for Buddy and I was so exhausted, but I was also so stressed out I couldn't sleep. So I thought I would go home and take a nap. No, I couldn't settle my mind down. I was just so upset about what had happened. Jamaican Dogwood's really been known for quite a while. It was in the pharmacopoeia, I think. I'm not sure if it's the British or the American pharmacopoeia. This is what pharmacists and doctors would have been using, beginning in about 1844. So it has been really researched. Let me start with my notes from the Southwestern School of Botanical Medicine, late Michael Moore's course that I took. Pacifica, I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce the Latin. We're just going to call it Jamaican Dogwood. Was good for insomnia with spasms, especially. So, like, when you're falling asleep and your legs jerk and it wakes you up, that's, I guess we would call it, make a restless legs situation. That's really annoying. Trust me, I had to deal with that with my back injury. It caused a lot of nerve damage. He said Jamaican Dogwood was specifically good for insomnia with spasms, pain, nervous irritability, tachycardia, cervical neuralgia, and as a general antispasmodic. He used the tree bark and the root bark in a tincture, and he said use with care. Response is highly individual, so start with a low dose. So it's stronger for some people than with others, and never combine it with other painkillers because it could make them more effective. It's definitely contraindicated in combination. Looking at what Miss Grieve wrote in a Modern Herbal in 1931, she said in some subjects it cures violent toothaches, neuralgia, and whooping cough, promotes sleep, and acts as an antispasmodic in asthma. It also dilates the pupils and is useful in dysmenorrhea and nervous stability. In other subjects, it causes gastric distress and nausea, and overdoses can be toxic, can produce toxic effects. So when she's saying dysmenorrhea, she's talking about a lot of the discomfort and irritability that comes with certain menstrual issues, which we normally now call PMS, but that's really too broad a category. Of course, it used to be called hysteria, so I think we can feel that maybe dysmenorrhea is a little bit more of a less offensive term. The doctors always used to talk about all the hysterical women out there, and now we treat we might still refer to hysteria as an emotional response, but not one so much rooted in menstrual issues. Uh, Resources of the Southern Fields and Forests actually had a nice section on Jamaican Dogwood. Now, I've discussed this book before. It's really one of my favorite books when it comes to plants. When the Union, the North, blockaded the South, they did not allow imports from anywhere. Okay, they blockaded all the ports. The idea was to starve out the South, and yeah, a lot of people starved to death. Uh, you know, I'm sorry if you think Lincoln and Grant and Sherman and all those guys were great guys, but whether you believe that the Union cause was just or not, that war was won through war crimes. It was won by purposefully targeting civilians, women and children, burning farms, burning houses, raping and pillaging, um, absolute war crimes that are now illegal, probably still practiced in almost every theater of war. But there is nothing, absolutely nothing, moral or just or upstanding about General Grant and Sherman. In fact, Sherman's own men believed him to be demon possessed. He was so violent and cruel, and both men were severe alcoholics with manic depression and war criminals. Okay, and I'm not a big fan of Abraham Lincoln either. Now, I would have been pro freeing the slaves. I would have been somewhat of an abolitionist. Actually, Robert E. Lee opposed slavery. That's not something that's taught anymore. Now they're tearing his statues down. But any way you look at it, America, the Union, won the Civil War through war crimes, through specifically targeting women and children, and a nation that was founded on secession from England certainly retained its right for states to secede from the Union when they did not believe the Union served their purposes anymore. So, yeah, put me down as a pro-Confederate. I don't care what you think about that. Honestly, my great-great-great-grandfather, I suppose, was captured at Fort Fisher, and we only know how he died because a cousin sent a letter home. He contracted dysentery on a prison ship to Elmira and was thrown overboard to drown to death. That's a war crime. That cousin wrote his letter just before he was forced to stand at attention in 4 feet of snow, naked, along with many other Southern troops, who then died from gangrene caused by frostbite. Those were war crimes. And so, you know, I don't visit the Lincoln Memorial. But back to Jamaican Dogwood. Miss Grieve wrote about this plant that it was used for stupefying fish in South America, specifically at that time. I believe it was first discovered in Jamaica, but it is a tropical plant that grows in several places. She said that Wilson's Cyclopedia, that was a pharmacy manual at the time, said it yields a highly narcotic and diaphoretic tincture. Diaphoretic means it helps break a fever. The powdered bark relieves toothache, was included in the 12th edition of the U.S. Dispensatory. This would be a pharmacy journal. In 1844, it spoke of the plant as a powerful narcotic capable of producing sleep and removing pain in an extraordinary manner. When residents of the West Indies observed its effect as a narcotic in taking fish of the largest kind, he was induced to try it as an anodyne in toothache. And he found that the tincture was exceedingly efficacious and not only afforded relief when taken internally, but uniformly curing the pain, and introduced upon a dossel of cotton into the carious tooth. Okay, all that means is he took some tincture, put it on cotton, and put it in the hole in his tooth. The bark of the root was topically effective as well. And she goes into quite a bit of detail about that, but I think all you really need to know is that it has both internal effects for stopping pain and topical effects, which you would want to use as a toothache. And the same doctor began to use it when he felt a violent sensation of heat internally. We're just he's the one that figured out it would break a fever. And he also found that it helped with tachycardia, an irregular heartbeat. King's Medical Dispensatory of 1898 says Jamaican dogwood possesses active properties, its chief use being to control pain and produce sleep. Dr. Isaac Ott, who was mentioned in the Pharmacology of Newer Materia Medica, this again will be in the 1800s, and that could actually be a distant relative of mine. Ott is a family name, so I think that's kind of cool. But again, this is 1898. He did extensive experiments with the drug, declaring its physiological effects to be as follows. It increases the salivatory and cutaneous secretions, slows the pulse, increases arterial tension, succeeded by a fall of tension due to a weakening of the heart, dilates the pupils, except when passing into a state of asphyxia when contraction takes place. So apparently if you took too much, you could overdose. That would be what he means by asphyxia. It does not affect irritability of the motor nerve fibers, nor does it attack the peripheral sensory nerve endings. It reduces reflex action by stimulating Sechnow's centers and induces a tetanoid condition by stimulating the spinal marrow. Finally, he pronounces it is narcotic to frogs, rabbits, and men. So be careful if you're going to give it to your frogs or your rabbits. Unpleasant results have been occasioned by even small doses of Jamaican dogwood in some. Some people experience nausea, vomiting, and headaches. In large doses, it will cause convulsions. So it's not to be played around with, but it is generally regarded as safe. I had a very good herbalist friend in Pennsylvania who had Lyme disease. And she actually came up with a very promising protocol against Lyme disease. She used Jamaican dogwood for pain and found it to be very safe. So I don't want to overstate, but it definitely respect. Treat the herb with respect and treat your body with respect. Don't overuse anything. All things in moderation. So Dr. Hamilton stated the tincture of the bark of the tree, the same as the bark itself, is astringent. He also observed that it is powerful and a remarkable narcotic and diaphoretic, and that its local application was helpful in toothache again. You know, you got to remember, our ancestors had bad teeth. They were always looking for a toothache drug. He also found it useful for painful affections of the mouth. It's mouth sores, essentially, or ulcers. Burns, scalds, hemorrhoids have been relieved with it. A solution has been used as an injection for gonorrhea. Taken as administered, it removes pains, overcomes spasms, allays nervous excitability, and induces sleep. It is a favorite remedy in prolonged insomnia, particularly in the aged, and in those of an excessively nervous temperament. It should at least be given in preference over opiates until its utility or non-utility is established. So here we are in the 1850s, I think 1848 if I remember correctly. What was that, 1898? 1898. They were already saying that this is probably safer and should be preferred to opiates. Why did people forget about it? Well, who's going to make a profit off of an herb? I mean, I'm sorry, but this goes back to 1500s, 1400s even. Theophrastus bombastus Paracelsus, Paracelsus, one of my favorite herbalists, said that the medical industry, and he was talking specifically of apothecaries and the doctors' guilds. So these were guilds that said, this person has the right to make and sell medicine, no one else can in this country. This person has the right to practice medicine, no one else can in this country. That actually goes back to the 1400s. Paracelsus accused them of such greed that he said most of the drugs and herbal formulas they were selling were counterfeit, useless, and worthless. And for that reason, they tried to have him killed. He was run out of several countries and had a price on his head. In England in the 1600s, Nicholas Culpeper said the exact same thing. He said the doctors were essentially idiots and greedy, and the pharmacies were selling counterfeit, useless drugs. That's going back a ways, you know. And now we look at Pfizer and Moderna and all those great companies that have made billions, probably trillions, off of the COVID vaccination. Okay, maybe I'll bite my tongue, maybe I'll hold my tongue, but you think there's a reason that sudden death is now a leading cause of death in America? Uh, you can look at the actuarial tables, and I can't remember the fellow's name, but he's actually done a whole book on it. He looks at the actuarial tables and has found that people who are employed and were mandated to be vaccinated are dying at a historically huge rate. I mean, the numbers are off the charts. He's saying we're going to lose like a generation of productive people due to these mandates. You know, look into it. Make your own decisions. I did not take the vaccine, and I will not take the vaccine. It was not sufficiently tested to satisfy me. And also, because the research was done with aborted fetal cells, morally, I don't feel like I can take that. So that was my decision. I think everybody should be able to make their own decision. And it's actually not only against the Geneva Convention, but it's against all morality for a government or an employer to force someone to take a vaccination against their will. No, government in America does not have that constitutional power. It just doesn't. Now, yeah, they can tell soldiers what to do. They can tell government employees what to do, just the same as a private employer. But it still isn't right. Just because it's legal doesn't make it moral. And, you know, we're beginning to reap what we've sown. And it's just so idiotic that people got so afraid of what was essentially a bad flu that they turned the whole country upside down and forced people to do things against their will. And in like Australia and various places, Belgium, I mean, they're putting people in almost like concentration camps, following them around with drones. And what happened in Canada was just awful. But we have lost, whether it's through death, sudden death as they call it, or problems, lack of learning, kids that were taken out of school and masked, and we've lost a generation of productivity. We really, this has negatively affected everyone. The cure was far worse than the disease, and it was not a cure because people who get vaccinated keep catching COVID. Now, I don't see why anyone would take the COVID vaccine because you vaccinate yourself so that you don't catch something, right? I mean, I get a tetanus inoculation or whatever so that if I get cut by something rusty, I don't get tetanus. I get to take a rabies vaccine so if I get bitten by a rabid animal, I don't get rabies. You take a COVID vaccine, then a second one, and then a booster every 6 months, and you still get COVID? I mean, pardon my language, but what the hell? Why would you do that? Why would anyone do that? Anyway, it just goes to show you how stupid people are and how quickly a government can turn to totalitarianism, whether it's 1850 or it's 2021, 22, whatever. People will trade their rights for safety. They'll give up their freedoms. They'll just fall in line and do what they're told. And Americans are no more moral than the German people who, you know, the Nazis told them to put the Jews on the train and take them to the concentration camp. Americans would do the same thing if the government said that about the unvaccinated. Do not doubt it. It's human nature. We're all flawed and stupid and evil. Okay, that's called concupiscence. We're born with it. We're actually born with the proclivity leaning further in the direction of doing bad than doing good. Every single human being that walks the face of this earth is born with a fallen nature. Never forget it. That is the biggest lie in politics, in government, that humanity can be perfected. through policy, or that there can be peace on earth, or we can get rid of poverty. Humans are always going to be violent and greedy and evil. That's human nature. That's why, that's actually in the Christian religion, why we need a savior. Now, if you're Buddhist or whatever, that's why you need detachment. You need detachment from all your greed and desires and everything that makes you miserable or makes you make other people be miserable. I mean, you can go down the list. You can go to various religions and philosophies, going back to ancient Greece and before. You're going to find the same messages over and over until, we get up to the French Revolution and Marxism and, where it said that people could be perfected through institutions of government, that it was just ignorance, and if people were taught, they would be better. Well, we now have universal education. We now have a higher rate of literacy than any time in history. We now have access to every piece of information, every bit of wisdom ever recorded at the tips of our fingers through the internet, and we live in a more violent, disgusting, base, perverse, low-class culture than we've seen in at least 1,500 to 2,000 years. We have gone the other way. We have devolved. We have not evolved. Anyway, back to herbs. So I think we've looked enough at the old books from the 1800s and such. King's dispensatory, again, said it was specifically good for insomnia, nervous unrest, to allay spasms, to control pain, to allay nervous excitability, migraines, and neuralgia. Let's come a little bit up to date. One of my favorite herbalists is a real character. His name is Seven Song, and no, that's not his real name. He's a Jewish guy from New York. He's not a Native American. He is a member of what they call the Rainbow Tribe, and Rainbow Tribes are a bunch of hippies, and they get together and party naked in the woods, eating a lot of mushrooms. And he's one that would not really participate in all that so much. He usually runs the first aid centers, and his Rainbow Tribe name is Seven Song. Anyway, he's a great guy, and we probably would not agree on anything political or philosophical, but he's the kind of guy you could definitely disagree on everything and value him as a neighbor and a friend, and it's okay to disagree. We can still get along. I don't know how many times I have to say that, but it's absolutely amazing. When my little dog Buddy was missing, I went down to the grocery store, and a friend of mine down there, he's a very evangelical Protestant, okay? I'm Catholic. He's probably non-denominational Protestant. You would think we would do nothing but argue, or we couldn't get along. It could not be farther from the truth. One of the greatest guys I know. And he saw me and he asked me if I was okay. And I said, well, what had happened to Buddy? And he said, can we step outside for a minute? I want to say a prayer for you. And he did. And he prayed for me. I mean, like if you ever watch Duck Dynasty, he would kind of remind you of Phil Robertson in the way he prays. And it's just very straightforward, and he has full faith, and just a wonderful human being. I can't say enough good about him. You can have a different ideology. You can have a different religion. One of my good friends until a few years ago when we lost touch was an Egyptian Muslim. I have been very good friends with, homosexuals, communists. I mean, some very good friends who were absolute Marxist atheists. And when you treat people with respect as individuals, as humans, there's no reason we can't get along. We don't have to agree on everything. And I know there are probably 2/3 of the people that listen to my show and are listening to my voice right now disagree with 90% of what I believe. But they like me as a human being and respect my knowledge of herbs, and I return the same respect. I never say to someone, well, no, I'm not going to be your friend, or I'm not going to help you with your problem because you and I don't agree. That is humanity, and so much of our culture right now is trying to turn people against each other, to strip their humanity, their shared humanity. And what does that end up with? Well, it ends up with, like, Jews on the train going to the gas chambers, or my great-great-grandfather being thrown off a ship to drown because he was no longer seen as a human, he was seen as a rebel. Anyway, Seven Song is a very cool guy, and he's very knowledgeable. He was also a student of Michael Moore, Southwestern School of Botanical Medicine. He runs a very similar school up in New England. He runs a free clinic. He does a lot, like when you see those Antifa lunatics out there burning stuff down and the police hit them with a gas grenade. He's the guy that's running out there washing out their eyes and taking care of them, okay? So like I said, we're totally a polar opposite politically, but I think he's one of the very best herbalists in America. He likes Jamaican dogwood. I will quote him. He said, I have become an admirer of Pisidia. I believe that's the way you pronounce it. Like I said, it's Jamaican dogwood, and that word comes from fish, just like you remember from your Spanish and French classes and all that. And I am glad to get to know and apply clinically. I have only used it in tincture form, so all discussion of it here is about it in tincture form. Pisidia is a very serviceable pain medicine, especially for general body pain, such as after an accident or a jousting tournament. So if you ever go to a jousting tournament, you can bring along your Jamaican dogwood. I can't say as I've ever been to one. He said it is used as an adjunct for skeletal muscle pain. Its sedative effects are minimal, which makes it useful for daily use, and it does not impair the cognitive process. That's also what my herbal friend in Pennsylvania found. She found that it could be used daily, and it did not interfere with her cognitive processes. In fact, she worked as an EMT, so she specifically found Jamaican dogwood as a pain medication she could use, a painkiller she could use and still do her job as an EMT. He said it is an excellent first aid remedy because when it works, and no one plant works for everybody all the time, it works reasonably swiftly and can take the edge off of acute pain. In other words, it is a useful plant for a wide variety of pain. It combines well with other plants. Some plants are stronger pain relievers, such as valerian. Now, valerian is what we call a simple sedative. It can just knock you out, so you can actually go to sleep and not feel the pain, but it is also an antispasmodic, and it helps with nerve pain. So he likes to combine it with valerian or hops, but they may leave the patient feeling potentially lethargic and not thinking clearly. Of course, well, valerian and hops are both sedative, and they can make you lethargic and slow down your mind a little bit. He said that Pisidia, Jamaican dogwood, does not have this effect commonly. That can also be a disadvantage sometimes, such as after a traumatic accident. So if someone's very, stressed and their heart rate's up and they, are really worked up about it, you might want to use valerian or something to kind of take the mental edge off. But combined with them, he found that Jamaican dogwood and a sedative such as valerian was a very, very good option. And he said another important attribute about Pisidia is that it is well tolerated without unwanted side effects being common. This gives more room to play around with dosages when treating pain. For me, it is a classic first aid plant. It can be offered to someone as soon as they arrive at a first aid station, even while still evaluating the extent of the injury, and the dosage can be incrementally increased. So, that is Jamaican dogwood. As I said, moderation in all things. Remember that these herbs, such as Jamaican dogwood, wild lettuce, and a few others, don't work for everybody. For some, they will work for a while and then they stop working. That was my case. For some, they won't do anything, but for about 50% of people, these herbs, like Jamaican dogwood, could replace prescription opioids or illegal opioids. Now, I want to say my friend that I mentioned in Pennsylvania, her name was Barbara Kralis, or Kralis, Kralis. Her protocol for Lyme disease was looking very promising. I haven't heard from her in about 5 years. But if you want to look her up, that is her name, Barbara Kralis or Kralis. And if you know someone with Lyme disease or you need a good herbalist in Pennsylvania, I don't think you could go wrong. All right, y'all, have a great week. If you have dogs, give them a big old hug and a special meal. And remember, prayers are answered. I'll talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, for your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.